Some docs say that HDL to triglyceride ratio is a good indicator of insulin sensitivity, while others say it isn't relevant. What's your opinion? Look, HDL to triglycerides, when you've got low triglycerides and higher HDL, you usually tend to be in a low carbohydrate state. So it is an indirect indicator, but you can be taking seed oils, having high HDL, low triglycerides, and being quite sick. So no, it isn't an indicator of good health. While it may, and insulin, it just basically means, and I don't even like the word insulin sensitivity, because insulin is a signaling hormone that actually has signaling roles. This bullshit about being sensitive or insensitive or this or that is just nonsense. It's just crap that people have come up with. Insulin is insulin. It's like cholesterol is cholesterol, whether it's in HDL, in VLDL, LDLC, or whatever. It's still just one thing. And insulin is, produced in your pancreas, and it's basically has a signaling role. And there are receptor sites, insulin receptor sites throughout the body that it signals through. So, yeah, but generally speaking, if you're in a low carbohydrate state, your HDL tends to be higher. Not in everyone. Sometimes it can be slightly lower, depending on genetics. And that has to do with the ApoE. And I have a video on the ApoE side, which I did with Pim Johnson. So if you go and look at my playlist and you find Pim Johnson, and Johnson, as she's called, Swedish, and then you basically look at the ApoE one, you'll understand what I mean about, because it plays a role in there. So there can be variations due to that. People with certain types of phenotypes tend to produce higher HDL, and others not as high. Still higher than somebody on a SAD diet. And your triglycerides, basically, because you're basically exporting fat around the body, pretty much your body's actually taking up a lot of that energy. So you end up with more LDL-C, because as VLDL shrinks, which is very high in triglycerides, and VLDL shrinks into IDL and then LDL very rapidly when you're in a low carbohydrate state, you end up with less triglycerides. But you're actually exporting more than on a SAD diet, because you need to provide fat for your whole body. So if you're actually measuring from the liver or the export, you'd have it much higher. But when they do the tests, by that stage, you've got more LDL-C left over. It's just, that's the reality. So, yeah. So basically, yeah, there's a lot of reductionist bullshit, and people don't talk about the dynamics of energy moving around the system. But generally speaking, yeah, it's sort of an indicator ratio, but you have to look at the composition of the diet as well. If you're putting a whole lot of high deuterium stuff in there, you're damaging your mitochondria. Still going to be very unhealthy with seed oils. But generally speaking, low carbohydrate state will have higher LDL-C, higher HDL, and lower triglycerides, which means lower VLDL. And that's only because you're trafficking a whole lot of energy, and it's being taken up so rapidly that you don't have a lot of VLDL circulating at any one time. As a consequence, you show lower triglycerides. But if you were to do high intensity exercise and stuff like that, your triglycerides and your blood sugar will go up. And then if you were to basically then do a blood test, it would look very different. But you'd still be healthy. This is why I say it is at a certain point in your energy trafficking system and physical activity. So it's a bit more complicated, So I know people use reductionism to basically explain a certain state, but it's not as, but definitely it is an indicator that you're more fat adapted in that regard, and that you're doing better. But then I would look at the composition, how healthy that better is, in a sense.